Miss Wendell, will you note the roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. We have all Assembly members present in chambers.
That brings us to approval of the minutes. You have the February 7th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting minutes in front of you. Any changes or edits? Seeing none, those are so approved. That brings us to agenda topics. Our first agenda topic is partner agency program updates. We're going to be starting with the JAC. Mr. Hibshin, thanks for being here. Are you starting with a presentation for us?
Yeah, I think I am.
Awesome, thanks. Would you prefer us to hold questions until the end or ask questions throughout?
Whenever you have a question, just start yelling at me.
Okay.
That works. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to let you know what we've been doing at the JAC, where we are right now, what we're doing and where we want to go in this next fiscal year. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a filler slide. This last calendar year was the JAC's 50th anniversary. And we spent the year creating a lot of new opportunities for artists. We held the first in-person iteration of the Ak Rock Indigenous Music Festival, which was a lot of fun. That was in partnership with Clinton Haida. We welcomed over 70 international, and not all international, but 70 Indigenous artists to Juneau, and we're guesstimating around 1,500 people to that festival, so it was very well attended. We had our 50th anniversary celebration where we hosted which will now be biennial Catherine Colhurst Reddy Awards, where we were able to create a lot of artist recognition. So really cool stuff, but outside of these big celebrations, it was really a year of evaluation and planning, I think. Many of you know it was my first year as executive director, so I was very pointedly keeping my ear to the ground, listening, trying to figure out what the strategy was going to be as we moved ahead. We currently have a MACP grant, which enables a lot of our in-classroom programming in partnership with the school district, as well as some additional arts activities outside of classrooms for Juneau's youth. This grant will carry our education activities through August 2025 and continually provide funding. So right now, it's really important for us to focus on creating additional sustainable education infrastructure so that activities don't just completely fall flat at that time. This last year, we facilitated over 25,000 points of arts interaction with the public in Juneau, and we helped increase the livelihood of over 200 local artists in our lobby shop through leading classes, in our gallery, workshops. We've hosted a lot of other stuff. But right now, in light of what's happening with the school district, our continued strategic direction is pretty clear to myself, the board, and our staff. We want to focus on bolstering our existing education programming and really laying a groundwork for continued success with those workshops and classes, and then also start exploring new opportunities for more educational activity in collaboration with a lot of our really close community partners. So I wanted to describe just a few of the education programs we have running right now that we've been trying to figure out how to grow and make bigger. Technically, art is currently hosted intermittently at the JAC, roughly bi-monthly. This program, I think, will be of really high value to Juneau as we plan to expand out and focus on more professional skill building workshops that really sets artists in Juneau up for success. So think like how to write grants, how to build a portfolio, how to apply for event alcohol licenses, which is just a lot of people don't know how to do that. And if you're going to be an artist, you're probably going to be throwing a party at some point. So just all these kind of hidden skills that a lot of people aren't super familiar with. Those workshops are designed to be very accessible and appropriate for all ages. I've had conversations with several high school students just coaching them on how to build a college portfolio because there's not really a resource in Juneau right now to help them do that. Stress-Free Art Night is another really cool one that it's probably my personal favorite. It's just a free forum, free to attend, art night at the Jack, and I highly recommend you come if you haven't yet. They're free to attend. They have periodic themes. The one coming up this month is painting, but we provide all the materials and it's all ages are welcome, and we have staff on hand to help guide people through the process if they need it. But yeah, we focus on painting, figurative drawing, printmaking. It's a really cool experience for people. And then not on this slide, we actually have art classes too, which is kind of a cross between those two workshops. More focused on art production, but more technical, more geared towards adults. The last two we had were Bollywood dancing and an earring making workshop. So just cool ways to start learning more about the arts. Future programs, like I said, we're in early steps of identifying and exploring opportunities with community partners to deliver cross-cultural and intergenerational arts education experiences across Juneau. We're in really early planning right now, so I don't have a whole lot to update you on in that front. We're doing this presentation at kind of a funky time for us. But the big intent and focus here is to make arts education more accessible by drawing it out across Juneau and not have it be so solely focused in downtown. So we're in conversation with the Methodist camp. We're in early conversation with SHI and parties across Douglas to really broaden how we're able to create access to the arts. I think you guys might have heard this, I'm not sure, but due to the work done by the JAC and all our other partner organizations, this year Juneau ranked number 8 nationally on the country's most vibrant small arts communities scale. That's all research and data collected by SMU Data Arts that does this every year, and they're very well respected in that regard. But by creating more funding and more opportunity in this realm, that's only going to go higher. And it's only going to attract more people to Juneau, which I think kind of innately will help solve at least a lot of issues that Juneau is facing. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, due to the crisis in the school districts, we understand the need to focus and supplement activities in the classrooms however we can, because arts activities in the classrooms probably aren't really going to be going anywhere exciting in the next like 5 years minimum. Given the importance of a productive arts economy in Juneau, we really think it's critical to ensure that education activities are continually present and accessible during this financial crisis. So with continued funding and through our planned programs, the JAC will help ensure high-functioning community arts organizations and carry that line of education where GSD won't be able to for the foreseeable future. If we let this pipeline falter, you guys all know the arts are positioned very uniquely here, and we will feel economic ramifications years down the line if we kind of have a diminishing of local artists who are able to produce artwork. It will affect us in big ways. So we can't control what projects or areas of support that other organizations applying for funding through our grants funded by the city. I lost track of that sentence. We can't control what they want to fund, but we can make it clear that we're prioritizing education initiatives in the grant application process, which we have already done online on that application, and we are working to model that in our own programming and actions as well, like I've mentioned. You can go to the next slide. So everything that happened last year, I wanted to just give you guys a couple of success stories. We don't have time to go through all of them. But we had some really cool stuff come out of the major grant process. Akimi, who I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, they are the Alaska Independent Musicians Initiative. They're working really hard in creating groundwork and carving out space for growth in the independent music sector in Alaska, which is really exciting because basically every other state has this and we don't. So they're focusing on creating accessible and equitable resources for musicians, and they're an entity that I think the JAC is going to be partnering really closely with in coming years in helping implement that infrastructure. I'm really interested in creating avenues for economic success for artists, not just everyone else in Juneau. So it's really cool to see that this is finally happening, and I'm really excited about it. KTOO, with the $10,000 they were awarded, they were able to host Magog Cuento, which I learned a lot in that exhibit. I'm sure a lot of you guys did too, but it was a really exciting showcase of a kind of hidden history in Juneau that I think was really important for a lot of people to see and understand and hold as we move into the future. And then Juneau Alaska Music Matters, or JAM, they're one of these after-school programs that I think will be really, really critical for a lot of youth in Juneau to make sure they're highly funded and active in the future, just because they hold such a unique spot of music education, Indigenous language education, and marrying those two things together in really creative ways to enable just a really cool cross-cultural exploration of storytelling and creativity. So they were able to continue their operations, and they've actually got a few really cool grant opportunities because of the funding they received. So we're happy for them. We love it. We haven't, you guys, a lot of you know, we haven't received enough funds to fully fund all of the grant requests we receive each year. Last year, the total request came in at just under 260,000, and we only had about 115,000 to work with. So we weren't even able to touch half of the need, which is disappointing, I think. So what I want to do in the year ahead is really look at how we can creatively and effectively work to expand that out. These groups, there were about 17, I believe, last year. They were responsible for creating around 11,000 interactions with the arts with Juneau's youth. So their reach is very wide and diverse. They collectively transformed the $100,000 that we re-granted out into over 19 million in revenue, 7 million of which went straight to local payroll. So this is a really great way to get a big bang for your buck. Arts organizations are really adept and efficient with their money, and they're really well equipped to create huge economic payout. Earlier I mentioned that the JAC had 25,000 roughly points of interaction. If you add up the interaction from all these organizations, that more than triples to over 75,000. So we touch the lives of a lot of people through these grants. I think you can go to the next slide now. Thank you. The strategy, I've talked a lot about this already. Our goals are to serve these 16 plus organizations that we work with every year for grants in greater capacities. We want to implement accessible and equitable arts education programs, and we want to grow and expand our own programming because we've seen a lot of success in it this last year, and I think there's going to be even more need moving forward. Internally, I'm really characterizing the JAC and kind of by extension through these grants, all the other arts and cultural organizations in Juneau as really operating in tandem with the school district for the foreseeable future, kind of parallel to them, ensuring that there is still activity and education in the arts for our young people, which is just really, really important. And all of this work, again, will kind of serve a dual purpose of bolstering our economy. Again, you guys know the arts are positioned very uniquely here, and we just kind of naturally bleed into every other business sector. So the more groundwork infrastructure we're able to lay and maintain and create, the better off a lot of other economic sectors are going to be in the future. We are a nonprofit. We have to judiciously allocate resources. And I'm in the process of submitting the appropriate form with increased funding requests and all that. And thank you, Assemblymember Atkinson, for helping me out with that. So that will be coming down the line. But that's largely everything I had to say. That was a very quick, high-level summary. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Madam Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Hibshin, for being here. It's always good to see you. In terms of working in tandem with the school district, I know that the school district has been kind of busy lately, but I'm wondering if you've had any opportunities to touch base with Superintendent Hauser about, or whoever at the school district about the ways that JAC can help them. That's my question.
Not yet, but that is on my agenda of something to do. We've been busy, and I know that's not an excuse, but I just haven't had the time.
Well, they've been busy too.
Yeah, they have been. No, there's a lot of conversations on the horizon. I think not just with the school district, but with all these other partner organizations I've been talking about, and just seeing how we can creatively get our fingers out there and create more opportunity for people across Juneau. Yeah.
I thought I saw another hand. Did I see another hand? Any other questions? Mr. Smith?
you, Chair Wall. Mr. Hipshin, those, do you happen to have numbers, or maybe you'll bring those when you come back, about, the amount of funds that these arts grants can leverage, like, because I'm sure they're taking our grant in for a little bit, but getting a lot of funds from other organizations. I don't know if you have that.
I have a limited amount of that. That's not I don't believe that's a required or a listed like question on the application, but I do believe a few of the organizations have just organically provided that. That being said, we don't have any of the applications in for this year because those typically come in the week before the deadline, which is at the end of April. So I do have some numbers from fiscal year 23 that I can get to you, but nothing reflective in this last year, unfortunately.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hibsham, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
And next up, Juneau Community Foundation, Ms. Skilbred. I see the two of you coordinated your outfits today. Ms. Skilbred, if you could press the button on your microphone until it turns green. There you go.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm a person who needed the directions on how to play the microphone. But thank you for having me here tonight, really appreciate it. Want to just give a pretty brief overview of the funds that we receive. Every year we receive funds from the Assembly and CBJ in order to provide social service grants. And so since 2016, we have received $8,141,000, and we, the Juneau Community Foundation, have provided $8,612,000. So about $16,000 between both organizations, or a little bit more, 16.75, going into social service organizations in our community. And I think you may have this more. Wouldn't work as a slide. I printed it out. I can hardly read it myself. So, but it has the years, and almost all the years that we've combined forces. Then you can. Are you pressing things? So this is just one bit of information, and I think you have this as well because it's easier to read it on your on a handout, I think. But basically, we had organizations that come to us every year requesting funding. And what we run is a process we call the Juneau Hope Endowment CBJ Social Service Grant Program. And that grant program begins usually in October every year, where we go and start having conversations with the folks that have received grants in the past and with the community. We have a series of listen and learn sessions where we bring the executive directors and whoever they want to bring together in a variety of different areas, including homelessness, mental health, suicide prevention, substance abuse, adult education. And basically what we're working on together with the people who know best in our community what's happening in these areas, these nonprofits, we're working on where are the gaps, what are the priorities, what needs to be funded. And several programs, including Housing First, came out of those discussions as far as, how do we start moving things forward. And so that's sort of the beginning of the process. We then ask for folks to give us a letter of interest, and that's due early in January so that we can figure out about how much are we looking at that people are going to be asking for funds. And we also want to make the grant process as friendly as possible and as transparent, I guess that was the buzzword before, as possible. And we don't want to waste the time of nonprofit leaders who have very little time. And so what we do with those letters of interest is it's enough information for us to get an idea of how much more in requests we have than funding available, and typically about $600,000 more in requests than available. But then we work with folks to see what's really needed. Where can we come up with some more dollars? Are there other funds of the foundation that can chip in? And where can we fund them somewhere else completely? For example, one of the slides coming up will show you the Feeding Juneau Kids. And what we've done is move that into its own fund that we raise money for annually, fairly successfully, because people in Juneau like to feed Juneau kids. So this though shows the grants that we had for 2023. The process, we're in the midst of the process for 2024 right now. We have all the applications in. And then grants are, people know that what they're getting, organizations, by mid-April. And then the grants are usually given out in between the 1st of July and about the 1st of August as we get CBJ money in and as organizations need them. So last time we had 30 letters of interest in 2023. Of that, we received 29 applications and we funded 21 of them. And then I was just going to give unless anybody has questions about the process, we try and do a very public process. We're on the radio, we do Facebook, Instagram, and other things in order to let people know about the opportunities of applying for grants. But we can go on. Okay, great. So I did not give you information on every one of these because there's so many of them, but I pulled out some of them. First one was Housing First, just to give an idea, of what the impact has been. 15, almost 16,000 safe emergency shelter nights because of the funding. You can see the other, 43,000 meals provided, and the 64 units of housing at Housing First have been full almost 95% of the time, so it's pretty full. 28 additional units of supported permanent housing are scheduled to break ground this spring, and hopefully they'll be able to, they're working on the last dollars that they need in order to make that all come to completion, and I think that will. You can go on. Weekend student food bags. Douglas Community United Methodist Church has been the leader on this for years. We have assisted in the past couple of years and taken over by assisting more with providing a significant amount of funding for this. They have an average of 638 bags that are given out every weekend to students that need food during the weekend because there's no student breakfast or lunch happening. They record almost 9,000 bags being filled during the September to December period. One of the things to know, and I've noted challenges on all of these, cost of food has increased, number of students needing food has increased. Our community has seen a dramatic increase in people needing food, and I'm sure many of you have read about or heard about it. And so that's something that this helps with. It doesn't, take care of the problem. So then we can go on. Senior services, we provided $110,000 to Catholic Community Services. They provide Wheels on Meals to people in town. They also have congregate setting for meals as well. They provide a program called the Gatekeeper Program, which is they train people who go to other people's houses, like delivery people, post office personnel, to be aware that if they see a senior that looks confused or they don't see someone for a while and they should be, that they're able to report back to Catholic Community Services that will get somebody to reach out and see if they can help. Those are some of the main things that they do. Yeah, go ahead.
Through the
Madam
chair.
Mayor.
Sorry.
There's a rumor that this is income-based. Is that true? Can any senior get it, or does it only certain seniors in a certain income bracket can they get it?
I believe that Meals on Wheels, you would have to ask Catholic Community Services. I know that in other communities, because we've been paying for it for my mother-in-law, you can pay and receive it. I believe here that primarily the food is going to people who are unable to provide it themselves, but not sure. Again, cost of food increase, the COVID money is declining, more people needing Meals on Wheels. And I think SNAP benefits for both of these programs has really been a huge issue, not only here, but all over the state of Alaska. So now we can move on. Mental health support, just for an example, JAMI Health and Wellness, $410,400. And they have branched out. They provide mental health services and physical health services. They are able to meet people in different places because they have different facilities now. They are one of the main nonprofit providing mental health services in our town. And that's for folks that can pay and folks that cannot pay. One of the big issues that they face, and as does most every of the social service nonprofit, is filling vacancies, difficulty keeping staff and difficulty filling vacancies. And part of that is that these jobs are very demanding and they take a toll. And you can now get a pretty good pay for, or at least equal to what you can get at some of these organizations by taking a fairly easier, more fun job, basically. So, and I could go through this, but I think you can see it, read it, unless you have any questions. Okay, and then I think this one, CERC, Southeast Regional Resource Center, we received $60,000 from us. This has been a continuing, we've given them these funds for several years, and basically there would be no GED program or GED testing in Southeast Alaska if they didn't receive these funds and conduct the classes that are needed for people to pass GEDs and then have a certified GED proctor be here in order to deliver the tests. And so it's a huge thing. They are finding one of their challenges is now that online learning has become a real thing, it's harder to get people in the door. But at the same time, online learning has limited success in some ways as well. So, yeah. Okay. And last one's families experiencing homelessness, Family Promise. Provided $20,000 to Family Promise. They sheltered, I believe it was like 64 families, 158 individuals. And you have to remember that all these numbers are basically July through December. So it's half a year for everyone. All these organizations provide a interim report, which is what these are based on, and then a final report at the end of the year. And we try and make sure that where we're providing staffing funding, we provide a 3-year grant. And so we look at that because if you only provide a 1-year grant, why would anyone take it? So, yeah. And so that's, in a nutshell, some of the outcomes. I have outcomes for all of these in that list of 20-something. But I think you have more on your agenda today, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So.
Questions for Ms. Skilbrad? Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Skilbrad, I just wanted to confirm on your social services grants spreadsheet, I see a administrative fee of $50,000, and for the total grants, almost $3 million. That's like 1.6%. And anyway, just thank you. Anyway, appreciate you for doing that work at that.
You're welcome.
very small
Yeah,
rate.
we sign an MOU with the city every year for the funds, and in that, $50,000 is pretty much matched by what we put into it. And mostly, since this began when I was the only staff person and I was working part-time for the Juneau Community Foundation, this has become a major part of my job, so it tends to up my hours closer to 50 a week than 40, but it's worth it. So
Thank you for what you do for us. Thanks.
thank you all for your continued support.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here.
Yep, thank you.
I'm going to keep us rolling. We're going to move on to agenda topic number 3, 2024 assessed property valuations. We have a memo. I'll turn it over to Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wall. On page 30 of your packet is a memo that describes some preliminary property assessment values. The property assessment cards went out on Friday. There's a public service announcement that went out with that, letting folks know to look for the white cards coming into their box. That also kicked off the 30-day appeal period. So Monday was the first day the assessor's office was accepting appeals. They had a very light day, which was fabulous to see after all of the appeals they've had over the past few years. The data that you have here in this memo is preliminary, and but it's important that you got the feel of where assessments were going. And it's preliminary for a few reasons. I got this on February 24th. They were still, as an office, going through, doing their quality checks, finishing out the assessment process. So our assessor was confident enough at the time that these were good numbers to share with you, even though in the end, there's probably variation in the exact dollars. The other reason why I would ask you to consider these a little bit preliminary as we move through the budget process and we start talking about our actual taxable base, these do not include exemptions. So this is before exemptions are applied. And there are a whole host of exemptions ranging all over the place. Two of the more popular for residential are the senior citizen exemption and the disabled veteran exemption. And those applications are due on March 31st. And just for 2 seconds of explanation, if someone applies for the senior citizen exemption and it's applied to their property, they do not need to apply again. The assessor's office does do an eligibility check every year, but as the property owner, you don't necessarily have to apply every year as a senior citizen. It's different with most of the disabled veteran exemptions. So most individuals that receive that exemption are required to present a letter from the VA, typically stating that they are still disabled. There's some language that the VA could use saying somebody is permanently disabled, in which case they only need the letter once. But the vast majority of individuals who receive this exemption have to go through a process annually getting an updated letter from the VA. So those are due on March 31st. The other thing that obviously will affect assessed values is the appeal process. So as new information is shed on property structures, conditions, et cetera, these values may change. And just to give you some context, I threw in there that in 2023, we roughly had over $600 million in exemptions. And again, that's over all property types. So that would include nonprofits. There's a whole bunch of exceptions, or exemptions rather. And so I wanted to share this with you early. I believe the assessors published today on their website the official reports. But again, the roll doesn't get certified until June 1st.
Thank you, Ms. Flick. I see Mr. Bryson and then Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this, Ms. Flick. Just so that we can kind of have a sense in our head, is there anything that would extremely or significantly change the exemptions? If we had 600 last year, could we expect 600 million plus 1.5% increase? Or has something changed that would make the exemptions significantly change in one direction or the other?
Through the chair, Mr. Bryson, there's nothing significant that would cause these to change happening, over a large swath of land. However, as was discussed at the retreat, and we seem to talk about often, we do have an aging population, which means that more and more seniors will be eligible for the senior citizen exemption. I don't know that would throw the needle one way or the other, but that would be the only thing that I would say from a trend perspective as we anticipate more and more senior citizen exemptions.
Thank you.
Ms. Hale. Oh. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing these preliminary numbers with us, because it is a little bit better, although nobody likes their property assessments to go up, but it is better than we first anticipated. You did your first lunch and learn, and you were quite excellent at it. When is our second lunch to learn? And I believe the topic is more on appeals.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just got the reminder from the city manager that I needed to plug those. So yes, the next Lunch and Learn will be on Friday, March 15th. Again, in this room, it will be on Zoom, it will be recorded. And the intent is when I presented on March 1st, I really spent most of the hour talking about the assessment process, who are the players when we talk about governmental assessment of properties. So I will take that hour and condense it, and then talk about appeals. And my intent is to talk about appeals through kind of a case study methodology, if you will. So, if we have 14,000 parcels, there's 14,000 different ways that people could appeal things. And so my intent is not to talk about every single example. Every property is unique. Every property owner is unique. And there's no single recipe to having an appeal be, if you're the property owner, successful or not successful. And so I think by giving some examples of situations and appeals and information that was given where it was favorable to the property owner, and then also give some examples of appeals that didn't gain traction for the property owner, and just kind of talk about those generically. I haven't decided yet if I'm going with superheroes as my characters or cartoons, but they will be based on real life stories, and certainly attributes change so that it's appropriate just to share in context.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Chair Wall. My question was about the lunch and learns as well, and my question was, I didn't get to say for the first one, but I'm sure it was great. What was the impetus behind doing that? And does the finance department have plans to do other lunch and learns? And do other departments have plans to do other lunch and learns? Because I certainly can think of some topics, and I'd just love to understand where that came from.
Yeah, I'll take that one. There's just been a lot of questions, and I feel like misinformation around the assessment process. And, when I talk to the finance director, I hear complaints from the public like, and you don't even allow this. And then it's like, oh, no, well, we do allow this, but it's like complicated. And then it's this type of methodology. And you're like, well, but with depreciation. And so it's just so complex. I was working with the mayor on a way to just try to help our public understand, that it's not a black box, and there's a methodology and there's professionals. And so I really feel like that triggered this first kind of lunch and learn. And in an ideal world, we'd have endless resources to also do like a website and a white paper and a Instagram ad, and I have like endless dreams of endless communication dreams. And so the thought process was that during this appeal period, it would be good to also like help people unpack the mystery of like, can I just walk into the assessor's office? What kind of information do I have to have? As far as other lunch and learn topics, we got some good feedback at the first one that a permit center lunch and learn would be really awesome to be like, how do you do permitting? What's the average time for a permit to process? Why would I need a permit? And we're open for other topics, as staff time allows, to just try to maybe make that a regular practice to help. I learn a lot from them too, and the assembly members that were present, I'm sure, did. So thank you for letting me expand on that.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think that's great. I think anytime we can unpack something that there's a lot of misinformation around, and I share your ambitious communication with the public dreams. But I definitely would want to make sure that we do other topics as well, with the understanding that there is limited staff capacity, but there are other topics that we could help the public through besides just how to appeal their evaluations.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess also another follow-up on the lunch and learn. I was there for about half of the lunch and learn in person. I'm just curious, do we have any idea how many people might have tuned in via Zoom?
Mr. Kelly, if I recall, there was 20 or 25 on Zoom, as well as, it was not a full house as you experienced Monday night, but there were several people in the audience in person.
I have a question, Ms. Flick. When we had our assembly retreat in December, I remember we got some kind of numbers and assumptions about what our budget was going to look like. And I could be wrong. Did we estimate what that percent change was going to be in overall property assessments? And if so, how does that compare with this initial number?
Thank you, Ms. Wall. I was going to come back to that. As I was writing this memo, I really wanted to say, yay, property assessments didn't jump like they have in past years, which is great for property owners, better for appeals, but boo, when we did our retreat data, we had to make an assumption of where property values were going, and we used 2.5%. So from these numbers and which we use to start our projections, our real projections or budget planning, it is less in assessed value than we had anticipated when we just did some projections at the retreat.
Thanks for that. Just good things to keep in mind for the body. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you for providing that update at this point. That's really helpful to know where we're at. I'm going to move us on to agenda topic number 4, just a verbal update on the audit process from FY23. Ms. Fleck.
Yes, thank you. The 2023 CBJ-wide, which includes School District, Bartlett, and all the CBJ departments, that financial statement audit is still in process. As you probably know, typically we like to have that wrapped up, done, published, off of our brains by the end of the calendar year. So we are running behind. I can give you a number of reasons for that. Some of it self-inflicted, some of it thanks to our lovely friends at the General Accounting Standards Board, GASB, as you are probably familiar with hearing that term. But as you've heard throughout different conversations this evening and earlier, Department of Finance, particularly our accounting group, experienced some vacancies. We've had a lot of staff turnover, and not always at the most convenient time for work that we needed to do, but that's the show will go on. And so we continue to roll with that. The GASB put out 2 new requirements on governments that are hugely significant and can't be compared to anything that's happened in decades. So governments across the country have been talking about how to account for leases and how to account for what they call SBITAs, which is SBITA, or software-based information technology agreements. And we don't say that whole thing often because, whoo, exactly. So it's, the point of GASB is they're trying to create standards and methodologies so that across governments, when you look at financial statements, there's a common understanding of what's being presented. That also provides the framework for auditors to look at our governments doing what they need to do and then meeting those standards. And so the changes that came about with the leases and the SBITAs was an issue for us last year as we rolled the lease part out, and continued to struggle this year. When I went to the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, their annual conference, it was in Portland last year, the room was full. If there was a fire marshal, they would not have approved of it. There were people sitting along the walls, in the aisles, in the center aisles. I had a seat on the floor behind the stage. Like, it was crazy the number of people there, because these 2 particular items are really hard. They're hard to get your arms around. It's hard to understand. Guidance from GASB changed a little bit, which sometimes was not a big deal for us. Sometimes was like, oh, okay, now we got to take 5 steps back and do it again. So it was a long pole in our tent as far as closing out the books. I feel bad about that, but I feel not as bad about it because our auditors also took a significantly longer time than they anticipated they would need to do a proper audit on those 2 things. So we know from our peers that that's been a struggle. What I do want to tell you about our audit is, in close conversation with our lead auditor, we're confident we're going to close out both the single audit, which is related to our grants, and the regular ACFR financial statements by the end of this month. And given the fact that we are about to roll into the budget cycle, our plan is to provide you those copies when they are officially released, but then have LG Rayfield come in our June AFC meeting after we get through the budget process, and they can talk about their audit, any findings that they have. They'll talk about the school district, Bartlett, CBJ as a whole, and we'll just do that all at once after the budget cycle. I expect somebody would say, oh, so are you going to have findings? My anticipation, we did have a finding related to leases and SBITAs. I expect that to still be there. We, as the parent government, if you will carry findings from Bartlett and from the school district. So those will roll forward to us. I know that there was mention in last year's audit about the turnover documentation, and just how, as a finance department, do we carry through when there's a churn in staff. And that's something that we've been working on. We still have work to do, so I would expect to see something like that in the audit as well. I don't anticipate that you're going to be shocked or have surprises. I believe our financials represent where our real financial position is, and that from that perspective, I feel very confident. So yes, we have work to do. We have ways to mature and get better. And I really hope that next year, when we do 24, we are really done by December because this has been not fun for anyone involved, having just that carry on through. But I'm happy to take questions if you have questions about the audit.
Thank you, Ms. Flick. And thank you for that report and for, and thanks staff for continuing to work on the things that were in the audit last year. So really appreciate that. Ms. Hughes-Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I really appreciate knowing all the different things that affect. How are we? You mentioned, I know we had big vacancies for a long time, and last year that was a huge part of it, but how are we doing on vacancies? Because I think you said there were still.
Thank you for the question. We at the moment in the accounting section or in the controllers division are fully staffed. I have some resignations. So that, I'm going to say that quickly, and I know that's changing. And we're working to fill those positions. So as soon as we know that somebody's moving on to something else, we're getting that rolling.
Other questions on the audit? Seeing none, I'll just, again, remind the committee that we won't be discussing the audit when it is complete. We'll wait a bit until it's done, but please do open that when it comes through our inbox. And I know Ms. Flick would be available for questions that you have when you get to see the document. All right, moving us on here. I'm going to keep us going, if that's okay, unless anyone needs a break. Assembly, community grants, and budget calendar. Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wall. The next time that we get together as an Assembly Finance Committee will be on Saturday, April 6th, starting at 9 a.m. We will have breakfast before that. That is going to be a long day. Kind of think back to your December retreat. And we will keep it going. We'll make sure you'll have several presentations, so there will naturally be good times to stand and stretch and get a refreshment, get some more water, whatever you need. So in your packet on page 31 is the is our plan, and I guess I will say a couple things about that. There are a couple of regular assembly meetings in this calendar. So like April 1st, April 29th, May 13th, and actually June 3rd, you have a regular assembly meeting. So those are in this calendar, but those are regular assembly meetings. The other thing I will say is, as this was decided on, we're skipping our April 3rd AFC meeting, our April 10th AFC meeting, and our April 24th AFC meeting. And I know with the 10th and the 24th, at least at the time we worked on this, there were no other assembly meetings or committees on the calendar. I can't say today if that's still true, but that was true when we did this. There's a couple other things, and Ms. Wall, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I wanted to remind you about the deadline of April 10th, getting any of those community funding requests to Chair Wall. Feel free to copy myself and Ms. Wendell. It's really important that we get those in by the 10th because we need to turn those around into a meaningful packet for you so that you can talk about them on the 17th. So that's really important. But I also, if I may, I'll have Ms. Wendell share her screen for a moment. We had talked earlier about making sure that you had information available to you. So this is the CBJ website, and if you go to Assembly, there is a new thing called Assembly Grants. And if you click onto that, and it will get there eventually, there is lots of information for you about granting that you've done historically, and just really good information. What's not there is the Assembly Community Grant Funding Request. So you all got that in your email. If you need it again, let me know. We'll be happy to send it to you. But just, there were questions about who have we granted in the past, how much, what kind of projects. And this website, Ms. Wendell did a fabulous job of putting it together. I think provides you really good information for that. And Ms. Well, I don't know if there's anything else.
Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Flick. Do you, I've heard from several different people who are have sponsors or are looking for sponsors. Do you feel confident that our community of grantees is familiar with this process, as they know what to do?
Thank you, Madam Hale. I do feel confident that those who were active in the process last year have been made aware of the process this year. We've sent out communication. We've tailored that communication to our partner agencies, even though we don't really tag them that way. So, Travel Juneau, the JAC, JCF, the 4th of July Festival Committee, those that get regular ongoing funding from the Assembly, got a slightly different message that said, we're planning to provide X as in past years. If you need additional, please go seek a sponsor. And for those who were not in that group, got a communication saying, hey, our process has changed. We had notified them earlier, back in September, October, that we were looking at changing the process. So we did a follow-up to that same group, letting them know kind of the timing and what they needed to do. So from that perspective, yes. What we did not do is run PSAs or newspaper advertisements that say, hey, come and ask the Assembly for money. We didn't do that. But those who participated in the granting earlier certainly received communication from our office.
Mayor Weldon.
Thanks. Help me remember what day that we have to let the school district know the minimum amount. Is that the 8th or is that the 29th at the regular Assembly meeting?
It is on April 29th, Madam Mayor. It is the final letter E, motion to establish local funding for school district operations.
Okay, because people get confused about that one, and then at the end, we pass it. But we have to give them the minimum amount we'll fund at that time, so on April 29th, thanks.
That is correct.
Any other questions? Excellent. I think we just have one more item, export manufacturing exemptions. Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I have one more item, and it does require a motion and action from the AFC. This is a bit of a housekeeping item, but starting on page 32 in your packet and following are the applications for export manufacturing exemptions. And this is a regular exemption. Our Assessor Mary Hammond did a great job of laying out the information in the memo, and then you have the actual applications. This is a process that you do every year. And if you are comfortable with the applicants and approving them, I was coached by the city attorney, so I'm going to look at him when I say this in case I mess it up. You would need to approve the applications here and request that they go to the full assembly for final approval. Yes.
Mayor Weldon, do you have a motion for us?
Thank you. I move that we approve the export manufacturing exemptions for Alaskan Glacier Seafoods, Alaskan Brewing Company, Forbidden Peak Brewery, Devil's Club Brewing Company, and move it to a full assembly for approval.
Any objections? Seeing none, so moved. All right, that brings us to next meeting date. As Ms. Flick said, that would be April 6th, 2024, which will be here on a Saturday, all day long. There will be Zoom, there will be food. do your homework, and see you there. And with that, I'll call the Assembly Finance Committee meeting adjourned.